Community-centered, community-supported. Alaska Public Media. Alaska Insight is supported in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers just like you. Thank you.
The military has operated all across Alaska since World War II, leaving a legacy of decades-old contamination. Many Alaska communities worry about their health, and the expense of removing it is daunting.
The community doesn't have the funds. We didn't create the contamination. We want to work with the government to make sure it gets cleaned up.
We'll get an update on the remediation of formerly used defense sites right now on Alaska Insight. Good evening. Alaska's military history is long and storied. During World War II, the battles with Japanese soldiers came right to the islands of the Aleutian Chain, and the buildup in American forces here left infrastructure and toxics in remote locations. We'll hear about one project in Unalaska and discuss the work of cleaning up these legacy contaminants. But before we get to that discussion, here are some of the top stories of the week from Alaska Public Media's collaborative statewide news network. With forecasters expecting sub-zero temperatures in Anchorage this weekend, Assembly Housing and Homelessness Committee Chair Felix Rivera is requesting Mayor Dave Bronson use emergency powers to give people experiencing homelessness a place to stay warm. The request came during a committee meeting on Wednesday, one day after the Assembly approved a 50-bed capacity increase for its walk-in shelter. Bronson has not indicated he will exercise emergency powers. On Wednesday, he discussed plans to put a contract before the Assembly at their next meeting to establish a warming area. A task force convened by Governor Mike Dunleavy to examine the state's child care sector released its first batch of recommendations this week. According to the state's health commissioner, Heidi Hedberg, the recommendations are aimed at reducing barriers for providers by streamlining the licensing and background check processes. Hedberg says the task force's focus over the next year will be on how to help families struggling to find care. Alaska State Troopers say 2 people are charged with trying to smuggle drugs into Bethel's Yukon-Kuskokwim Correctional Center in an attempt organized by 2 current inmates. According to charging documents, the 2 inmates, Dane Hodgkin and Frederick Wilson, coordinated 2 separate instances where Bethel residents Sarah Walker and Rebecca Flynn allegedly threw packages over the center's fence. According to troopers, one of those packages was a bag of white powder that tested positive for methamphetamine. You can find the full version of these and many more stories on our website, alaskapublic.org, or by downloading the Alaska Public Media app on your phone. Now on to our discussion for this evening, the ongoing work to clean up formerly used defense sites. The military has left a large footprint on Alaska. Military bases and early warning systems dot the landscape all across the state, much of it dating to the Cold War and World War II. But what happens after the military leaves a region? KUCB's Theo Greenlee has this story about the military's legacy in one Alaska city.
It's pretty much impossible to miss the remnants of World War II in Unalaska. Concrete bunkers and rusted-out buildings dot the Aleutian landscape and integrate themselves into nearly every neighborhood in this fishing community of about 4,500 people. Unalaska played a key role in the Second World War. But when the war ended, the military left quite a bit behind. Grenades, chemical weapons, and other munitions have been known to turn up on the island's hiking trails and beaches. Bunkers and unexploded munitions get a lot of attention, but the bigger problem is invisible. People here live with pollution, originating from material the military left behind in the 1940s.
There was a lot of concern about pollution in the water systems, in the bays, and the creeks of that they used for subsistence at that time.
Mayor Vince Tudiakoff Sr. grew up in Unalaska. He says he's seen the health effects that he believes were caused by military contamination.
There's just all kinds of contaminants that we're dealing with out here. PCBs is one of the major ones that cause cancer and other diseases to our people out here over the years.
Tudiakoff is one of many who've been actively asking the feds to clean up his town. He says soil testing over the last decade has revealed well over 200 sites that were contaminated.
This area here in Skibo is one of those sites, and there are another 30 or 40 more sites just in this area within the 3 to 5 mile radius of this spot here that need to get cleaned up.
In the 1980s, the Army Corps of Engineers developed a program to clean up places used by the United States military. Today, the formerly used Defense Sites program has thousands of cleanup projects around the country, and Alaska has more than any other state.
We've got project sites pretty much everywhere that the U.S. military's has been in possession of land or has been occupying land all over the state.
Jake Sweet works with the Corps. He's in Unalaska to help remove soil that was contaminated by heating oil during the war.
We are doing an excavation to remove contaminated soil. There used to be a structure here that had an underground storage tank. The Army used to heat these buildings that were out here. And then when they left, unfortunately, they would sometimes leave some fuel in those tanks, and then over time the tanks would release fuel into the ground.
The crews bag up the soil and send it to a hazardous waste landfill in Oregon. The Corps finished cleaning up this site in September and installed wells to monitor the groundwater, which meets the state's safety standards. It was a major step in one of Unalaska's biggest residential neighborhoods. But that leaves dozens more just in Unalaska.
We do not have the funds. The community doesn't have the funds. We didn't create the contamination. We want to work with the government to make sure it gets cleaned up.
The Army Corps of Engineers is gearing up for the next 2 Unalaska cleanup projects. They've contracted with a local environmental firm and expect to begin fieldwork in 2024. In Unalaska, I'm Theo Greenlee.
Joining me tonight to describe their work helping communities identify and remediate toxics is Vi Wahahi. Vi is the Environmental Health and Justice Coordinator for Alaska Community Action on Toxics. Vi is also a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And Lisa Griswold works for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, coordinating remediation of contaminated Native corporation lands. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. The Army Corps of Engineers takes the lead on cleaning up formerly used defense sites. We did invite Rena Flint, the FUDS program manager for the Army Corps. Rena declined to appear on the program this evening, but did agree to a recorded interview that we'll see some segments of. So, Vi, I want to start with you. You've worked for ACAT, Alaska Community Action on Toxics, for over 20 years now.
Yes.
And the story that we just saw was about Unalaska contaminants. But you grew up on St. Lawrence Island, and ACAT has worked with Savunga and Gamble residents to test PCB blood levels. It's the longest running blood study in the nation. And give us an update. When was the last time blood tests were conducted, and what are the current results? What do levels say?
We were just recently in Savunga this past summer. We are committed to continue to monitor the blood and health and well-being of our people. And this current grant we have, Protecting Future Generations, and we have another grant with Northeast Cape. We now know our people have 4 to 10 times higher PCBs than the average American in the lower 48. And we've done 3 rounds of collection of the blood of our people. And this most recent one was in June. Our goal is to collect over 200 samples from 3 groups of from our island: Gamble residents, Savunga residents, and our Savunga residents closely associated with Northeast Cape. So we will be heading to Gamble this coming January to collect blood serum from our adults. But our Children's Protecting Future Generations project, due to the concerns we heard from our parents and grandparents of their ability, how these toxic chemicals can affect our children's ability to learn, we sought funding. So we're looking at we're collecting a small amount of blood to look at PCBs because they're they don't break down easy.
Right.
So, but also newer classic chemicals, flame retardants, due to concerns of how they can affect our children's
And so
ability.
that's just getting started, the child's testing?
Yes, that
Okay.
we've did our first collection in our community last winter. So we're just going back
All
to
right.
do some.
We'll have to check
some
in on those results as you get them. Lisa, turning to you, as part of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, some of the 44 million acres that were transferred to Native corporations here had contamination on them. You noted the problem wasn't really addressed much until 2022 when Senator Lisa Murkowski was able to get $20 million to start work. What's happened since that funding has been secured?
So what's happened since then is that money went to the EPA to start a funding program to actually establish a cooperative agreement program so that Alaska Native communities and Alaska Native entities could apply for funding from the EPA in order to conduct assessment and cleanup on those sites. Since then, the EPA has started that program. They did put out their first request for applications earlier this year, and 3 entities did receive funding. UIC, Tionic, and I'm going to blank on the third one, of course. But so they're getting ready to get started to actually do some assessment and cleanup on some sites that they have identified. In addition to that, the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation has also received some funding, and so they are starting up a program to do some verification work on sites that they believe may be contaminated ANCSA lands. And in addition to that, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium and the Alaska Native Village Corporation Association also received funding from the EPA in order to help do education and outreach about these sites and actually try to help these Alaska Native communities access funding so they can start addressing them.
And I know that you're sort of just getting started, but how much, if anything, is known, I imagine there's some known, about what type of contamination are on the ANCSA lands?
It really could be anything. The most common contaminant in Alaska is petroleum. So according to the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, approximately 75% of the contaminated sites in Alaska do have petroleum contamination. It's very common. Most often it's diesel. But past that, I mean, it could be, like Vi has discussed, it could be PCBs, there could be other types of contaminants. It could be really unknown. It really depends on how that site was used in the past.
Mm-hmm. Vi, from ACAT's perspective, what is the status of cleanup work of formerly used defense sites on St. Lawrence Island?
We have 2 Cold War era formerly used defense sites. Our people welcomed them. They came in the late 1940s and established the base first in Gamble and then on the other end of our island at Northeast Cape. We were an important strategic location for the military. So we have been trying to get the site reopened. These sites have never been properly characterized, and the sites on St. Lawrence Island were prematurely closed. Our tribe was not a party to the record of decision, and we identified PCBs, pesticides, heavy metal solvents, and massive fuel spills. And Alaska has 700 current and formerly used defense sites. And as I mentioned, they've never been properly characterized. They're in close proximity to our homes or our hunting and food gathering locations. So the ones on our island have been prematurely closed. And the Army Corps of Engineers just recently did their second 5-year review. So
You had very harsh words for the EPA and the State Department of Environmental Conservation saying they let the military off the hook. Why do you say that?
The burden of proof was put on my people. As I mentioned, we've had our own community-based project since 2000. We've been funded since then. We've done environmental sampling both at Northeast Cape and at Gambell. And we hire and train local people. We are our tribe. Both of our tribes are our partners. We have work group members that give us advice and guidance that are our elders and youth and former and current leadership. So we're committed to continue to monitor, because we know that there's landfills that were just capped. The Silky River at Northeast Cape, there was a massive fuel spills up to 160,000 gallons that we know of. It used to have the most abundant fish on our island. The fish have never returned. So there's no more seal haulouts, no more tomcod fishing.
So from your perspective, the cleanup is not done.
Yes, it is not complete. It's not protective of for public health.
Let's hear from the Army Corps of Engineers, FUD's program manager, Rena Flint. She says the cleanups are a collaborative process. The Army Corps works with Alaska's Department of Environmental Conservation, and at some sites, the EPA is a regulatory partner. But she says the decisions are made by a larger group.
One of the greatest things about the CERCLA process is that the whole point of it was to expedite cleanup and to increase public participation. And when I say public, that's all forms of stakeholders, especially at FUDs. The unique thing about FUDs is they're not on military land, so that's like the definition of a FUDs is that it's formerly used defense sites, so sites that have been transferred out of the control of the military. So we're working with Alaska Native corporations, we're working with private landowners, we're working with the state, we're working with tribes. So kind of all members of the larger Alaska community.
So, Vi, it sounds like from the residents of St. Lawrence Island's perspective, you didn't feel fully engaged in that process. Lisa, what do you hear from your partners? Is there enough engagement with local community members?
I think it's kind of difficult, and it's something that we've been working on, like something that ANTHC has been specifically working on with the ANCSA conveyed contaminated lands is something called the ANCSA Partnership Group. And that is it's a group that's made up of state and federal agencies, but also representatives from Alaska Native corporations, village and regional, Alaska Native tribes, other entities, and also members of the public. And they, over the past several years, that group kind of struggled to get going just because there also wasn't any dedicated funding up until, as you discussed, Senator Murkowski's $20 million. And so we're just now kind of picking that up currently, and that group is meeting quarterly right now, and so we're trying to get that feedback more. ANTHC currently has plans in 2024 to do some very specific in-community outreach and actually be going out to different villages and actually trying to get the word out and trying to get more information to people about this program and other types of funding programs that are available in Alaska for contaminated sites.
All right, thank you. Vi, ACAT also works with tribes in Brevik Mission, Teller, Nome, Elam, Wales, Unalakleet on these concerns over FUD sites. Are cleanups happening in these communities currently?
We got a grant in 2005 to continue our work on the island, but expand to the 15 communities in Norton Sound. So that grant was from 2005 to 2009, and we did work with those communities. And before that project began, we did Freedom of Information Act and collected information about the formerly used defense site in the Norton Sound region, and we identified 32 formerly used defense sites. And we reached out to tribes in our region. So those were the tribes that agreed to work with us. So we've done environmental sampling in those communities that I mentioned.
And so that project ended in 2009. Do you
That's
expect
correct.
that you'll, at some point, be revisiting those sites?
Yes, we are an organization. We get requests from communities to work with them. We don't have our own agenda.
Sure.
So it's important that as Alaska Native people, I'm grateful for the funding that the White House gave for the Ansca lands remediation, but not all of the 700 formerly used and current sites are on Ansca lands. So like mine, Northeast Cape ranked high enough for the National Priorities List or Superfund, and it was never placed. So it's important that the government, due to their government-to-government obligation, work with tribes to ensure that they are in the planning from the beginning, and that the remediation address all of their concerns, which the Army Corps of Engineers has not, honored. There was a 1952 agreement our tribe signed with the military, and they have never honored that agreement. So it's so important that as sovereign nations, the federal government and Department of Defense work with tribes directly.
Thank you. Let's go back to Rena Flint with the Army Corps of Engineers again. She says sites that were considered completely cleaned up can be reopened if new evidence comes to light.
That cleanup complete process, we do it in concert with our regulators and our stakeholders, tribes, and landowners. And we always say when we're closing out a project, if new information becomes available, just let us know. We can always reopen a project. And we would do that by starting right in with the new set of facts and where to go from there.
Lisa, have you worked with communities that have made successful requests to have sites reopened for cleanup?
I don't know about successful. I know that the Kowalungan tribe in Unalaska specifically has concerns about multiple sites that are specifically FUD sites that they've wanted to see reopened. I personally don't know if that actually happened. That would have happened with the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. I do know that there are other funding programs that people can request assistance through, like if it is even if it's just a regular contaminated sites or a FUDs, they could get more assistance to try to do some of that sampling, to try to see if they could find some of that evidence that maybe Rena is referring to that they would like to see to reopen a site. So if people have concerns, I would recommend that they reach out to either myself at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, or we also have some partners at DEC as well.
All right, thank you. And Via, I know that you would like to see sites reopened at St. Lawrence Island. What are you basing that request on, and have the communities on St. Lawrence made a formal request to do just that?
Yes, we will be sending a delegation to Washington, D.C. This coming spring. And we have new collection. We found mercury at Tsukli River, and a site away from the military installation. We sampled at the Tapisac, which is like 10, 15 miles away from the former installation, thinking we'd look at a background information. We now know that the extent of the military contamination is out further than what they reported. So we are going to be bringing a delegation and have meetings back-to-back with high officials in D.C., including Department of Defense, State Department, Army Corps of Engineers, and also Agency for Toxic Substances, Disease Registry, and with our congressional leaders. So our hope is to make a request that the site cleanup is reopened, because we are continuing to find legacy military toxics there.
Have you scheduled that trip? Is that, are you already queued up to go?
We're working with our work group members to see a time that will be best. So, and also the best with people we know up in Washington, the best time that would be good for us to go. So our goal is to get the site reopened because they've done cosmetic cleanup. And so it's so important that they meet with us and also find a way to work also with Department of Health and Human Services to address the health harms we're facing.
Thank you both so much for being here this evening and for the work that you're doing on behalf of all Alaskans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The military's buildup in Alaska during World War II was enormous, with rapid deployments of thousands of soldiers and battle equipment to remote areas of our state. Cleaning up after a war is difficult, expensive, and as we heard tonight, can take decades to achieve. But it is critical for the current and future health of Alaska communities. That's it for this edition of Alaska Insight. Visit our website, alaskapublic.org, for breaking news and reports from our partner stations across the state. While you're there, sign up for our free daily digest so you won't miss any of Alaska's top stories of the day. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Lori Townsend. Good night.